event. For those of you that have dialed in and are using the WebEx functionality, please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A panel throughout the event. We will hold everyone's questions until the end, but we'll make sure we get everyone's questions answered either during the event or after the event in email. If you have any problems with your technology, you can chat with me in the chat feature by selecting Jennifer Watring, or you can email me at jwatring, W-O-T-R-I-N-G, @edvgroup.org, and I'll put that in the chat feature as well. So now I'd like to turn it over to Michael Flory, who will provide the introduction for today's call. Michael?
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm Michael Flory. I am a research scientist and alliance coordinator with the Regional Educational Lab for Appalachia. I coordinate our Kentucky College and Career Readiness Alliance. Jennifer, I am trying to advance. There we go. And I'll lead us through kind of the introduction to the webinar, what we're hoping to do today, a little bit about the REL program in general, and then I'll turn it over to our guest speakers who have the most experience with the non-traditional instruction or Snowbound type instruction programs. And they can tell you all about what they have been doing, what has been working, where they've been experiencing some challenges. So a little bit of background first on REL Appalachia and the REL program in general. So the 10 regional educational labs are funded and supported by the U.S. Department of Education, specifically their Institute of Education Sciences, which is their research arm at U.S. Department of Ed. There are 10 of these RELs around the country. They each focus on a specific geographic region. This allows us to tailor the type of support that we offer. We also do webinars and other events which are certainly of national interest as well. I've heard that we have people from as far away as Alaska participating today. So it's not specific all the time to one region, but it is a national network where we can work together. There are effectively two main goals for the RELs, or two purposes for the RELs. The first is to conduct research in education, and the second is to help disseminate and build the capacity to use research in education. We do this through a variety of ways. The main mechanism that we focus on right now is through partnerships and alliances. This is very important because it's how we get really to the ground level, and we find out what are your specific issues. And for example, in Kentucky here, we have been working on various college and career readiness issues, but it was only through conversations with the districts and superintendents that we learned that, you know, there was probably a need around this specific idea of non-traditional instruction or when you are snowbound for a week or more. So it was not something that we would have ever thought of to do on our own, but it was definitely through this partnership. And you can see some of the other types of products that we offer there and the various areas that we focus in. So the goals for this webinar, as a research-based institution like the REL is, there will be, I'll give a brief overview of some of the research around what happens during school closings, how does that impact student learning. There's not a great deal of research on this, but there certainly is some. We'll then hear from the Kentucky Department of Education and their non-traditional instruction program, a little bit of the background and the rules that are in place for participating in that. And then we'll hear from 3 districts who are already participating in the program so that we can hear a little bit about how they prepare for these days, what they do during the days, what do you do when instruction is going on but your kids aren't there, and how can you expand beyond that? Once you've tried implementing it a few times, what lessons can you learn to affect instruction across your curriculum and across all of your days? So I'll go briefly through the research. As I said, there's kind of limited research on Snowbound programs specifically, or what you do to kind of replace regular instruction for just a day or two at a time. But there is research out there about the impact of student absences or what might happen during a school closure to different but related issues. There's also research about the effectiveness of online learning, which frequently is the strategy that most schools are using for when they do have to close or want to continue instruction. And then there are some suggested promising practices out there. It's hard to say that they are best practices. There's not, again, a lot of research to know that how large an effect these have per se, but certainly they're very promising. So as far as the first category here, the actual absence and the impact that it might have on closure, that it might have on student outcomes and student learning. It is, in fact, a very real and very well-known student outcome that if they are out of school for a long time, they lose learning that they had previously obtained. So if you give students a test in May before they go to summer, then you give them a test 2 months later when they come back in the fall, the test would show that not only are they still at May, they've perhaps backed up as far as April or even a little further as far as their learning. So summer learning loss is a real thing. Now, as you start to go to smaller increments, a few days of snow here or there, the research, it's one of those where the researcher has to say, it depends. And it depends on who you look at, what research you're looking at, what models they may have used. It's a little bit less conclusive. But there is, that said, still certainly research that indicates that even being out for a few days, there was research conducted in Massachusetts, for example, that looks at if schools closed for 5 days due to snow, about 3% fewer of their students scored proficient in grades 3 reading and math come spring test time. Another way to look at that is about 0.5% students will score lower or not quite reach that proficient benchmark per day that was closed. They've also found lower impact at higher grades. So if you're talking 5 days or 10 days, you could be talking 1 to 2 weeks of learning loss. Also depends, a couple other researchers found slightly larger effects. So again, somewhere around 1 week of school, potentially 1 week of learning loss. Now, the other interesting study that I want to mention, it was a more recent one. It's actually titled Flaking Out, which I thought was a rather creative title, also conducted in Massachusetts. And it suggested that school closure is not as big of an issue as some of these previous studies found. They thought that what they observed was that if you can close an entire system, the schools and the teachers are excellent at getting everybody caught back up because everybody will still be in the same place. They found that it was perhaps a larger issue if you had differential or disproportionate absences. So maybe some of your students couldn't get there even though school was open. And they found that this could contribute to as much as a quarter of the achievement gap. So they thought that closing in and of itself, when the school can prepare for it and teachers can prepare to come back the next day, may be less of an effect, but they actually suggested that keeping the school open could be problematic. Again, it's not entirely conclusive, but those are some of the different outcomes that have been observed. Then, so what do we know about online learning? Because like I said, this is probably the most common approach to handling what to do if a school is closed. Again, there are very few rigorous studies, so experimental studies of online learning versus face-to-face, but there have been studies conducted even within the REL program that look at online math instruction, comparing it to what you might do face-to-face. And these have shown that online learning has very similar outcomes to face-to-face learning. It's not necessarily any more or less effective than having your students there in class. There was some work up in the Northeast that looked at grade 8 Algebra 1 in rural areas where they used online instruction and mostly to increase access, but it worked, and students seemed no worse off and certainly better than if they hadn't had any access at all. Here in the Appalachia region, specifically in Kentucky, we looked at Algebra 1 using a hybrid model for teaching in class with computers as well as having an instructor there, and found, again, similar effect. So, and then in another review by the U.S. Department of Education, they looked at online or hybrid kind of blended courses, and that review also found that students do just as well frequently in face-to-face courses, and especially hybrid or blended instruction appeared to be very promising, more so than just strictly online. If you could still get a teacher in there working with the kids in some format, that was really helpful. The caveat, as a researcher, I'm bound to mention these things, that the courses that were studied in this review were quite varied. Materials, time, scope, number of students, size of course, all sorts of variables associated with it. But regardless, you added it all together, and they seem to be pretty well effective, just as well as, almost as well as having students in your classroom. So I'll conclude then with some online practices. These are some promising practices that can supplement face-to-face instruction. The first thing I'll mention is that there are many, many models of online or blended instruction. There are too many to go over here. Some of them that are mentioned out there are a rotation model, where you might have a face-to-face instruction one day and then online instruction another day, and that varies with how many students you have and access to computers. There's a flex model with online courses in a regular school setting so that you still have a teacher available. It might be in a library type setting, but you at least have some sort of mentor or some guide as an adult there to help them. An a la carte model with online courses that supplement materials, although it's largely still face-to-face. Enriched virtual, which is again a face-to-face course with maybe some virtual assignments. So, and those are just some of the different models out there. They're as creative as you can be. That's how creative you can get with some of these. Some of the promising practices though, and most of these come from the iNACOL group. They have done a lot of work on online instruction and incorporating technology into instruction in general. So most of these come from their suggestions. But prepare the school culture and climate for this hybrid or online instruction. Going online, whether in whole or part, is a pretty big change in philosophy and style, and so it can take time for everyone to come on board. And by everyone, they've found that it's administrators, teachers, students, and parents all need time to understand and accept what this is. Establish goals and the expectations. It's very important as you're personalizing the learning environment to help students know what they're expected to do and help teachers know what they're expected to do. Professional development is going to be important. Understanding differences in how to deliver instruction online compared to a face-to-face model. A lot of times online instruction is more collaborative, either multiple instructors or perhaps students working in teams. So the teachers will need experience with that, and they need experience with blended learning themselves. Some barriers that are frequently cited, and you may hear more about some of these from the actual practitioners who are facing them themselves and how they've overcome them. But it's important to address and acknowledge barriers up front. The quality of the content that you're delivering, the technology and access. Not everyone is going to have access, or there may be different language issues associated with access outside of a school. You may need a learning management system of some sort, such as, Blackboard is a common one. That's the one I always mention. It's the one I'm most familiar with. Also, financing, communication issues, various barriers to getting these off the ground, but they all have been addressed in different ways or could be addressed. I think the key here is the research suggests acknowledging them up front. So I am actually going to switch it over now, I believe, to Kentucky Department of Education so that they can describe their specific experiences with their program and what people are doing in Kentucky.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? This is David Cook. I just wanted to make sure I was a little late getting to you guys, and I apologize, but I want to make sure you can hear me.
Yep, we can hear you.
Great.
And I'm Beth Peterson with the Kentucky Department of Education.
David Cook also with the Kentucky Department of Education.
All right, so we're going to start off by just telling you about Kentucky's non-traditional instruction program. So just some basics of the program. This program is specifically designed to encourage anytime, anywhere learning. And it is mostly used on snow days right now, but it could be used on any day when school is canceled. So would that be illness or no electricity or flooding? Any day where school was supposed to be going on, but for whatever reason it was canceled. And the benefits of this program, and it does provide the academic continuity for the teachers and the students, and it does reduce learning loss, especially for our districts that are out for many, many days at a time. So the process here in Kentucky, districts apply for the program, then they have the summer and the fall to work out the details and get the planning ready. Then in the winter, then they implement the instruction. And then after the NTI days, they submit to us some documentation. So we just have an idea of what was going on these days. And then districts may receive waivers for up to 10 instructional days, meaning that they wouldn't have to make up those 10 days at the end of the school year because they're counted in the school calendar as instructional days, and they also are counted as teacher work days. Districts don't have to use all 10, but they're eligible to use all 10 if they would like to. And also then in the application that they give to us, districts kind of talk about how they're going to address the instruction for all the students in their district. So that includes students with disabilities, any English learners that they have, any gifted students, and students without the internet. So the districts really kind of take a look before the snow even falls on, okay, how can we meet the needs for all the students in our school district?
So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background, having been around the Department of Education and state education in Kentucky for quite a few years. This just didn't happen yesterday, and it didn't happen in a short period of time, but back in 2009, one of the first things that our then Commissioner Terry Holliday got in his ear a lot was from particularly eastern Kentucky counties in the mountains that were missing, as we've said, a lot of schools, sometimes upwards of 35 to 40 days in a particular school year. And their only real out at that point was to come to the legislature and beg to have some of those days, in essence, canceled so that they wouldn't have to make them up, or they'd be going to school up until the end of June. And so Commissioner Holliday came before the legislature and asked if and provided an alternative solution. So the first piece of legislation that we had at that time was basically a modification to our school calendar law that said that any district that had missed at least 20 days average over the previous 3 school years would be eligible to apply to this pilot program. So that pretty much limited it to those eastern Kentucky counties that we talked about a minute ago, because those were the ones who were missing that kind of time. So in other words, over the previous 3 years, you had to have missed at least 60 days of school in 3 years. So a lot of our western Kentucky counties who are in areas that are topography is a lot less rugged than it is in eastern Kentucky, weren't missing that kind of days. So the pilot was created, and we had districts apply just like they're doing now. And those districts varied. The first year we had 5 districts that participated. A few of those decided after a year that they weren't really ready to do it in the way that they wanted to, so they dropped out. We had 2 districts that pushed through the pilot all 3 of the first years that we had it, and those 2 districts are still participating. They reapplied under the new program and have been going strong and are actually kind of our guideposts for the program. So in 2014, the House of Representatives in Kentucky introduced a bill that was a sweeping calendar bill correction for several things that they felt were wrong with our school calendar law. But one of them was they took this pilot language that had been sitting in the bill for several years, and they modified it just a bit, and the primary modification was they took out the requirement that you had missed a certain number of days in order to participate in the program. So it, in essence, opened the possibility up to all 173 of our school districts. And we've had an increase each year in the number of districts who have applied to participate and been accepted into the program. Beth's going to tell you about the 44 that we have currently in the program, but I wanted you to get a bit of how this worked from a policy perspective as we sought to build this opportunity out for districts to be involved. So. I think that's it, Beth. Thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I have another slide. I forgot about that. So this is the actual language from the school calendar law that we have now. It's probably important to note that we do have a limit on the number of days a district can use the non-traditional instruction program. It currently sits at 10 days. Some of our longer standing districts in the program want to push for that to be changed or even eliminated, because they've gotten to the point where they really use the program on every day. They'd like to use the program every day they're out of school. I think the idea early on was that it needed to have some limit so we could manage it a little bit better. But it basically involves the opportunity to use virtual learning and any other alternative instruction that might be available to the district, as Beth said earlier. And the big thing that they have to do for us, and Beth will talk about this in more detail, but the law requires that their plan demonstrate how the teaching and learning in the district will not be negatively impacted. And I think that's a very important piece to understand here. Nobody has said, nobody is really saying that non-traditional instruction program is going to in some way drastically improve learning in school districts. But our hope is that because these schools are missing so many days in a row in many cases, that this program will make sure that learning loss doesn't occur and there isn't a negative impact. So it may not be a great positive impact, but the idea is it's better to have school happening just in time as school is going on than to tack days on the end of a school year like we have done in most of our districts, at least in Kentucky for many years, at the end of the year when instruction does tend to drop off just a little bit. So.
Okay, great. Thank you, David. So I'm going to share a little bit about our first year of full implementation, which was 2014-2015. And we had 13 school districts that participated in the program that year. And the data that we found they sent us, across our 13 school districts, we had 91% student participation. And across all 13, there was 98% teacher participation on these NTI days, which we're really happy to see such high numbers there. We don't have a cutoff. There's not a number that we're looking for. So we're really excited to see such high participation numbers across all the districts. We also visited each of the 13 districts just to kind of hear what was going on and how the program went, and we got a lot of really interesting feedback. We heard that the NTI days really excited and they were really engaging for both the students and the teachers. We heard from teachers that there was less reteaching once school resumes because the students had had their mind on school, so there was less of the reteaching once they came back. We heard that students really were able to practice and learn time management skills and working independently and problem solving because they were asked to complete the work and to kind of reach out to the teachers if they had questions and kind of be a self-advocate. So they were learning and practicing those skills. We also heard that there was increased communication with parents via email on these days, phone calls, social media. The parents just felt more involved with the whole process. There's also increased interaction with the community, and some of our districts really had strong social media campaigns to promote the program and the learning that was going on these NTI days. And then we also heard that districts are going to use this program as an entry point for blended learning. So yes, we're doing it on snow days, but can we use blended learning on other school days as well when it's not snowing? And looking ahead, in the 2015-16 school year that we're in right now, there are 44 school districts that are participating in the program. And for capacity reasons, we're not visiting all 44 this year, but we are visiting a sample of the districts. And then they all are sending in documentation of participation numbers for students and for teachers and some learning outcomes that were met on these days. So we will have an idea of what's going on and what the program looks like in all 44 school districts. And then looking ahead to next year, applications for the NCI program will be on the website soon. We're anticipating the middle or end of March they'll be up and ready. And there are two different applications. There's the application for districts that will be new to the program, and that's a little more extensive, and that'll be due May 6th. And there's applications for districts that are already currently participating in the program but would like to kind of renew participation for next year, and it's a much shorter, it's abbreviated application, and that'll be due May 13th. And then there's a committee that reviews, and we anticipate notification of participation for the districts by the beginning of June. And there's a link to our website there. On our website we still have last year's application and scoring rubric, but it's kind of a good idea or a good indication of what this year's will look like. It also has some sample materials that the districts have submitted. It has some news articles about our NCI districts and some just kind of question and answer documents and some general information if you're interested in learning more about Kentucky's version of the non-traditional instruction program. Okay. Now I'm going to hand it over to Lawrence County and their district that participated in the program last year, and they're participating again this year. And they're going to share what they're doing before the snow falls to get ready for the NCI program. So Dr. Fletcher in Lawrence County, you're up.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. This is Dr. Robbie Fletcher. I'm Superintendent of Lawrence County Schools. Can we have someone to say they can hear us?
I can hear you okay.
Great. Just to introduce the gentleman that's on the slide, you have on the left, you have Mr. Michael Muncie. He is our computer training specialist. Mr. Vernon Hall is our director of pupil personnel. Of course, the next guy there, that's me. I'm the third one on the slide. And then Mr. Thomas Burns, who's our director of technology coordinator. And just a real brief idea about Lawrence County, for those of you who may not know. We are in the far eastern part of the state. We do border West Virginia. Some of the research behind our county, we have the second most rural roads in the state, with approximately 400 miles of gravel road that we put buses on every day. So we do have some challenges, some barriers that we have to deal with on a daily basis, let alone when we have inclement weather. So that's a little bit about Lawrence County, and I'll move on to our part of the presentation. And there we go. Buy-in began with our local Board of Education. Our Board of Education formed an ad hoc committee to determine different ways that we could limit weather-related interruptions. Of course, some of the things that began was to look at our roads, are the ways that we can change our transportation system. Along that time, we had local government officials, we had educators, all began working together to find alternate methods to help continue learning on those weather-related days. At the same time, this opportunity came through the Kentucky Department of Education, Mr. Thomas Burns and Mr. Vernon Hall, and also our Chief Academic Officer, Ms. Cassandra Webb, brought this idea of non-traditional instruction to the committee. Of course, with the Board of Education presenting that already and already talking about that, there was buy-in. We had a lot of people in the community, our county judge executive and others, they're already on board with looking with different ways to try to continue the educational process. The idea of non-traditional instruction was a viable option just because we wanted to continue instruction and learning even though road conditions didn't make it possible to transport students. In all fairness, we do provide two different methods on our non-traditional instruction days because, as you can imagine, we do have some students that don't have internet. So we have a learning management system that we utilize. Our Director of Personnel and Technology team identified a learning management system for us early on to facilitate the non-traditional instruction. And a lot of you, I'm sure, have used things like Blackboard, Edmodo, We have chosen Google Classroom to use just because of the simplicity in other areas. But again, we're not promoting one or the other. It's just Google Classroom worked best for us. As we progressed, we also did paper copies. We had to do paper copies for those students that were unable to get anything from the internet. A lot of times parents would come to the school on those days to pick up packets, to work on that during that time, or they can also have the option once they return to school to pick up any type of paper copies of assignments that they had missed, and they have an ample time to get that back. So, but as we progressed, we really emphasized the message that we wanted to find a way to continue learning during these extended weather events, but we also wanted to facilitate change in how we did business every day. We didn't just want to do non-traditional instruction for the sake of saving snow days. How can we do this in a way such that we do this on a regular basis? We do this on not only on a regular basis, but can we do this on our non-traditional days also? So we really promoted a change in daily practice, blended learning. Increased use of technology was two of the focuses that we had moving in. Again, we felt like blended learning had a lot of promise. In this day and time, students really wanted to be a part of technology. They wanted to be able to interact a lot more with the content. So this opportunity was more than just how do we make up a snow day. Some of the things that you're going to see, and I'll hit parts as we go along, we had a lot of professional development that focused on the blended learning and the use of technology. But as part of our non-traditional instruction initiative, our classroom technology use has increased. Google Classroom, Google Drive, Google Forms, Flubaroo, Quizlet, even some paperless classroom initiatives have started with some of our teachers. It's also been used to facilitate learning, instruction, and sharing ideas. We have a lot of teachers that have classrooms created with other teachers so they can share ideas of how they're using Google Classroom, how they're using Google Drive. A lot of our professional development since we've implemented this is focused on how do we better utilize our learning management system to engage not only students but also engage teachers. Some of the things that I will also like to add is this has changed how we operate at the district level. We have Google Drive that has changed the way we conduct our district improvement planning and monitoring our progress. So again, not only has it changed from the classroom level, this non-traditional instructional process that we've gone through has also changed how we do business at the central office level. Now, getting into student buy-in, we really felt like one of the things that we did was a non-traditional instructional day was not simply a special event. Students were familiar with the program because many of our teachers were using our learning management platform in some classrooms on a daily basis. So when a snow day comes up, it's not a new thing. It's something that we're doing on a regular basis, so teachers and students and also our parents are comfortable with how to use the learning management system. Teachers are pushing content through Google Classroom on a regular basis. So when students was using this on a daily basis, they had buy-in because now on a non-traditional instruction day, it's almost like it's a normal instruction day, except we get to stay home, of course, and not put students in harm's way by transporting them back and forth on buses. So the student buy-in is coming along more and more because we do this on a regular basis. Now, as far as to promote parent and teacher buy-in, we have continual technical support for families and staff. For example, we have had trainings, and I'll talk a little more about the trainings a little bit later. We've had trainings for teachers. We have social media outlets, email, phone calls, a lot of different ways that we try to support parents. And one of the things I'd like to say at this point is this is parent buy-in on a whole new level. You can follow on social media and watch our parents talk to each other about how do you do this math problem? What is your student doing in reading class? How can I help my student teach this particular math problem or any other thing that's out there? It's been fun to watch parents not only help their students, but also learn from other parents about content. So this is really parent involvement on a whole new level. As I talked about too, when you have that technical support, people want to know they have a safety net. And we try our best to provide that safety net, whether it be through Twitter, through Facebook, through email, through phone calls. And we even have our staff members, we have our principals and a lot of our instructional staff that actually report to work on those days if they can get to the office. So they can actually take phone calls at the school. So as you can see, a detailed communication plan is essential. Not only communicating when we started, and this was an initiative that we're going into, but also the communication that happens the day of a non-traditional instruction day. Students have been provided passwords up front. They've been given practice assignments. You know, again, looking at the way when we first implemented, students were all given a practice assignment before we had our first snow day. So students were beginning to use this in classrooms, and teachers began to pick up more and more to make assignments on a normal day with our Google Classroom platform. Parents can get updates on their students' grades that we do through Google Classroom on Infinite Campus, which is our grading and attendance system. They receive an automated call to inform them that a non-traditional instruction day is being used. They can get technical support again from their teachers, our technical team, and even sometimes from their superintendent via social media. Teachers were trained, and over the past 2 years, we even had a lot of our TV stations have come in and done news reports on Lawrence County and how we're doing our NTI days. As a matter of fact, I can remember one story that went to a student's house, and we had one of our students to walk through what a typical Google Classroom day would look like if they were a student in Lawrence County. So a lot of positive PR around our Google Classroom, around our non-traditional instruction days. Other things that promoted buy-in, for the first time we were recognized as a proficient district. That came after our first year of being of using non-traditional instruction. Now, a little bit about training prior to implementation. Teachers created a Google Classroom. Our tech team, Mr. Muncie and Mr. Burns, went to every building. They trained every teacher on how to use Google Classroom. All teachers were required to post one homework assignment using Google Classroom prior to full implementation. We tried to limit as many issues as possible, so basically we had a dry run even before that first day. Teachers had to demonstrate an ability to interact with students through the platform. They had to be able to do chats. They had to be able to post assignments. All that happened before the very first day that we had for Google Classroom. And then since that first day, teachers continue to implement lessons that continue the instruction that's already occurring. And again, if we're using it in a regular setting, in a blended learning setting, it just makes it a lot easier when the students aren't in school. Teachers are encouraged to use the internet to optimize student interest and interaction. Teachers are pushing content to students through Khan Academy, Think Central, which is our Go Math textbook that we use, through YouTube, Raz Kids, and other online resources. All this is connected to our platform. We provide as much on the day before. Let's say tomorrow looks like a snow day. We get out information to our teachers to say, look, there's a potential tomorrow for a Google Classroom day. Have your lessons prepared so that you can post them as soon as possible. We have some teachers that begin posting the assignments at 8 p.m. the day before a snow day, especially if we've got 12 inches of snow, we know that tomorrow there's not going to be school, so the students can actually start the day before the non-traditional day. We can also show that teacher use of technology has tremendously increased. Document cameras, Chromebooks. We also have some teachers that bring your own device initiatives. Some of our teachers are flipping their classrooms. All this is a part of the training and the things that we're doing with our Google Classroom days. Before I move on to pass it on to Ms. Fields, some data that we can show as far as participation to show the buy-in not only from parents, but also from our teachers and others. Right now, we have approximately 97 to 98% of our students are participating this year, have participated this year in our Google Classroom or non-traditional events. That's a very high number. We have approximately 60% that actually participate on the day of. Then we also have around 35 to 47% that are participating via hard copy. So we try to provide two different methods for the students to participate. But again, after it's all said and done, all the data put together, we have around 97% of our students that are involved on non-traditional instruction days. That's something we're very proud of, and we believe that that buy-in has made a change in how we deliver instruction on a daily basis in Lawrence County. That kind of sums up the buy-in and also how blended learning has changed within our school. And I'll pass it on to Ms. Kathy Fields.
Kentucky, located just south of Lexington, Kentucky, and we too have significant areas where bus travel may be prohibited during the time of inclement weather. So the opportunity for non-traditional instruction days have certainly been of benefit to Jessamine County schools. And Beth, if you will advance that for me. The Office of Teaching and Learning staff met in preparation with principals to discuss what we thought needed to take place and to formulate a framework of time for sending the NTI work home. In Jessamine County, this is our second year to participate in non-traditional instruction, and we learned very much from our first experiences, and we are fortunate enough to have a certified council, which is a group of teachers from every school who meet monthly with me. And one of the things that we talked about this year is how much importance it was that we would have the same expectations across the district as far as each grade level was concerned, and then again that timeline for sending home any sort of NTI work. In the first year, we were caught off guard by an early snow in November, and we were not anticipating that, so we actually were not able to start with the very first snow day last year, but we learned from that experience, and we were able to set the expectations and timelines so that we were not caught off guard this year, and we were able to use that on the very first day. We also had our teachers meet in our PLCs to plan work for all students, and again, because we have a network of teacher leaders and this certified council with 13 schools in our district, we were able to unify the work that each grade level was going to be responsible for, and in doing so, we'd be able to have great continuity across our school district. We have an online platform, as Dr. Fletcher mentioned, and we also had those opportunities for practice sessions, both at the school level and at home, because one of the lessons that we learned from our pilot year is how important it was to make sure that parents understood the format and the platforms that we were using as well. So we actually had some parent trainings in our schools, and for those that were unable to attend those particular parent trainings, we sent home documentation of how passwords and logins particularly worked for our elementary students. We also, as Dr. Fletcher mentioned, have some areas where technology may not be as prevalent as others. So paper copies of our work was prepared for our students without the access to the internet, or in the event that we would have a significant ice storm, and of course our online work would be impeded because of electrical issues. So we always have the opportunity for paper copies to be used and accessed in the event that we do not have those the internet available. So social media and the communications for our non-traditional assignments were just critical for us. And we were very, very fortunate that on our first NTI day last year, we were actually hosting a principals meeting. So we were actually able to follow through with the work that teachers were doing electronically and students were doing electronically. We were taking questions live from parents, and from that we actually developed a website dedicated just for non-traditional instruction, and we were encouraging parents to post pictures or questions or comments, suggestions for improvement on ways that we could make this a better learning platform or a learning opportunity for all of our students. I have a radio program that I do weekly, so it was a great opportunity for me to talk about the bonuses of learning without regards to walls or weather. And as David said earlier, this is a great platform for us to use for blended learning as well. So again, I was able to use the radio broadcast as an opportunity to shed light into what 21st century learning could possibly look like for Jessamine County students. Also a great interest in our news media. We've had local newspapers as well as the Lexington Herald to come and do stories with our parents, actually, as Dr. Fletcher said, coming into our homes, following our students, getting parents' perspectives of the work that we've been doing. And of course, social media is definitely one of our best friends when it comes to getting the information out. On Twitter, I immediately inform parents and our local community when an NTI day is going to be used. And again, because of our director of communication staying so closely attuned to our websites, she's able to monitor any sort of concern that parents would have. Our teachers do not come into the buildings on those inclement weather days, just simply because many of our teaching staff would have to travel from either on the local roads that are hazardous or would come from another community also hazardous. So we've given them permission to work from home, and our expectations of monitoring the websites and their personal phones to follow up with student need or to answer any kind of questions that parents would have. Teachers, as I said, are expected to communicate with the students or parents electronically. One of the bonuses this year is we had a couple of our high school staff members who were actually prompting teachers and students to monitor their assignments a little bit more closely and to turn them in on time. So we had some teachers that were actually phoning parents and phoning kids that day to remind them that they needed to be online at a certain time, or the fact that they had not been online at a certain time. Teachers are responsible for documentation of all their planning, communication, or any kind of grading of those non-traditional assignments. We also have a program set aside for our classified staff. They may work through district or school professional development. We use this time for our cafeteria staff members to do in-house work, our bus drivers to do professional learning. This year particularly, they've done work with a disciplinary program that we're using. Last summer, our classified cafeteria staff did a summer feeding program and used the time that they would have technically been docked for other reasons to use that time for makeup of the NTI days during the summer feeding program. And this year, the principals and our curriculum resource administrators are doing an online book study with me, and we're using Google Classroom as a platform for improving our instruction and student engagement based upon the research in our book study. So it's been a great opportunity, again, for me to say to our community that not only are our students participating in 21st century learning opportunities, our principals and administrators are likewise doing the same thing, because we don't often have the time that we need to do that professional study. And of course, what better time to do that than when you can't get out on the roads and you can't get out of your home, and to be at home with a great book and to be able to correspond back and forth with your colleagues. certain situations, of course, may cause us to not be able to have electronic communication due to power outages. Again, we have some rural areas without high-speed internet. Another issue that parents brought to our attention last year that we worked through this year was the fact that there were multiple children in the home and only one computer. So we had to step back and think about what we would need to do in the event that there would be 3 children, sometimes from all 3 grade levels, and there would be just one computer access for the house. And so we needed to make some adaptations on how we would divide that time between those 3 students and the work needed to be done on one computer. Also, when we first started out on this endeavor, we did a survey, and while we did not designate that a cell phone would not be considered appropriate for a non-traditional instruction activity, some parents misconstrued that as an electronic device in their home, and we realized that there were some platforms that would not have been conducive to the work that we were doing during those days. And that the cell phone, in fact, was not one of them, and so we needed to step back again and look at those households that may not have even had a computer in their home that were using a cell phone for Facebook or other forms of social media. And of course, we do have some impoverished areas still in our community where there are no electronic devices in their home, and we do have public facilities that do have those available, but again, on extremely inclement days, those public libraries or public spaces may not be open as well. So there were times that we realized we really just had to have an additional platform beyond electronic communication, and that was why we developed the packets of learning for those particular times or those particular areas and students in our community. The packets also were provided to daycares, and we also have a district child care facility in-house, and parents very openly said that sometimes they were misplaced in their home, and it would be much of a convenience to them if we were able to provide their child care facilities here in our community or the child care facilities in our school with that homework assignment or that NTI packet. So we did that second year as well. And for those students that either did not have the electronic means, for whatever reason misplaced their physical hard copies of their work, or perhaps chose not to do that, work on either platform, we did provide opportunities for students to work after school. And this was a great deal of benefit for some of our at-risk students in particular, and we took great advantage of having those students work after school. As Dr. Fletcher said, we are very, very pleased that we had 98% of participation last year, and this year it's just become one of those things that we do on a regular basis. And it's the first day of NTI this year was very much just like an extension of any other day, so I was very, very pleased about that. Also, like Lawrence County, we saw an increase of our K-Prep scores, again, after that first iteration of NTI, so we were very, very pleased with that. Again, we have a Weebly address that you'll see located on the bottom of this screen. This is where we post everything that we do with regard to our non-traditional instruction days. We had, again, an opportunity for parents to post pictures of work, to ask questions, to make comments, to give us feedback, and that feedback was not only very helpful to us, but we wanted parents to understand that in the partnership that we have with our community, that their input was very important, and certainly if there were things that we could do better, we wanted to hear from them. So again, there is the address for the Weebly, and you can find all kinds of great information and feedback from our parents on that Weebly. Again, our community partnerships were just invaluable to us. You see Jessamine Journal, there's an article from our local paper. Again, this is an actual high school class using blended learning daily. Again, a great jumping off point from our NTI work last year. Again, from our Jessamine County Schools webpage in Weebly, in the lower column, you see two young boys, both in their pajamas, which we love, doing their classwork, again, in safety of their own home, and then one of our local television stations going into a child's home and monitoring her school day through NTI Jessamine County. So again, I'm really, really pleased with the community partnership. Again, the local radio station is one of my followers on Twitter and one of the very first persons that I notify after I notify staff that will have an NTI day, and again have that opportunity to have them count the great opportunities for their own children, because they are a parent as well, and how many opportunities our kids are afforded once the school year is over and they have opportunities for camps and those kinds of things without regard to weather. So a great opportunity for Jessamine County Schools, and certainly highly recommend, if you have any questions, that you feel free to contact me or go through our website and contact our Director of Communications, Aaron Wagner. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Cook, Superintendent of Corbin Independent Schools.
Okay, thank you very much. I am Dave Cox. I'm Superintendent of Corbin Independent Schools. We're located in the southeastern corner of Kentucky. We have about 3,000 students. We run about 20 bus routes. So certainly this is a program that we've been interested in from the beginning. This is our second year. We were in the, I guess, the second pilot last year. We're completing our second year now. It has been very successful for us as well. With me today is Mark Daniels, our principal of our Corbin School of Innovation, and he's the gentleman who actually brought this proposal to us and to our school board initially. So we're going to kind of tag team this, if you will, and we'll kind of proceed from here. Let me see if I can advance these slides. There we go. We're going to talk a little bit about and take a look at the district perspective and some promising practices after the NTI days occur. We're doing a lot of the things that the other schools have talked about. And certainly I always enjoy hearing what other schools are doing, because we've learned some things today. Mark and I have been taking notes feverishly as the two schools present, and we certainly appreciate the opportunity to hear them. But we'll talk a little bit about what we do afterwards. First of all, there's an issue of compliance and an issue of rigor. We certainly want to be sure that our quantity and quality of work is the way it needs to be, and that we're getting the same kind of participation as we would on a regular day. We have found out that we're actually getting a better percentage of work on a regular day than we do on a regular day, possibly because it's specific and very intentional. We allow our kids 5 days to complete the work after they come back. They can do that during extended school services, before or after school ESS, do it on their own time. We find this is a time when a lot of students who don't have connectivity, and which we're about 80% in our district, by the way, but these are some times when kids who don't have the access at home to do that, they want to come to school and do the same work online that their peers are doing. So we provide time to do that as well. The data collection obviously is very important for us after the event occurs. We utilize SurveyMonkey to poll teachers about participation, student turn-in rates, the amount of feedback that they've provided, the number of phone calls, all of the data that we want to know about as far as participation from both students and parents. We talk to our teachers about keeping very detailed phone call logs, email logs, and we look at those as well. Collecting sample work packets is a big part of what we do, making sure the assignments are of the quality and quantity, as I said, that we want them to be, making sure that they're rigorous. And I will share this. It's kind of interesting. Beth Peterson and I were laughing about it last year. This was our first year. When they came and did our audit, Beth said, well, Dave, we had one complaint on your district that made its way to my desk. And, of course, I said, well, what was that complaint? And Beth said, well, we had a parent call that said you were sending home too much work. and that they were having a little bit of trouble completing the packets. And I think Beth and I both felt the same way. If that's the kind of problems that we're having, we're doing okay, because our teachers take this very seriously, and it is a rigorous day of instruction. And it's getting more so as we go along. We're starting to perfect this just a bit. But Blackboard is our digital platform of choice. We also use Edmodo, teacher websites, a lot of the things that you have that you've already heard. But I guess the big thing from our standpoint is we've seen kids buying into this from the standpoint of coming up with ways to utilize this in other as far as other avenues, emailing back and forth to teachers, of course, the phone calls. Those things were how we initially started, but now we've got teachers Skyping. We have kids who actually did YouTube videos while they're practicing their band instruments and sending that to the teacher, or posting those so the teachers can look at those. But again, we initiated this with Blackboard last year. We're a Blackboard district. We have that available throughout our entire district. We designated 2 professional development days during the summer for teachers to both learn Blackboard technology and begin to create some lessons. We ask our teachers to do at least one lesson each semester prior to snow falling, and hopefully they would work out a lot of the kinks with the kids, where we're doing much better at that. We're kind of getting more into the mode of content creation, and Mark is going to talk about that in just a minute. But we're looking a little bit more at creating our own classes and loading our own classes, if you will. And we've got a lot of kids who are doing dual credit, a lot of kids who are always that are in AP classes, and they're always trying to find more time to take the kind of classes that are high interest to them, photography, forensics, those kinds of things. So we can create those kind of classes, put them on Blackboard, give them credit for doing that on their own time. And we've been really impressed with the fact that a lot of kids are interested in doing that. We just didn't know how much interest there would be, and it's really surpassed what we actually thought. But our primary goal is that we're going to be able to do with Apex and all the other curriculum providers that we have paid for in the past, and be able to have our own specific classes online created by our teachers. And we can use these during extended absences for kids, during homebound kind of circumstances, alternative schools where we may not have teachers with specific certifications, all those kinds of things as well. Mark is, and he will be speaking to you in just a minute, but Mark is our resident guru on Blackboard. We've had a couple folks from Washington down to do training with us in PDs. There's some more coming back this summer during our Certified PD conference. We do a 2-day conference in the summer with all of our teachers. Some of the sessions we're going to focus on this year are on the collaborate function of Blackboard, which allows students at home to connect and sit on classes, as if they were there. We certainly want to try to perfect that as we go. One thing I will add that I'm really interested in, and that's looking to share educational experiences with other districts. For example, we have, from what I understand, one of only 3 law enforcement academies at our ATC center, which is on our high school campus. We have a retired KSP trooper, very skilled 20-year veteran who's retired, drug interdiction guy. He's teaching our classes in law enforcement at the ATC. Well, we would like to potentially build those classes on Blackboard, share those, or trade them, if you will, with other districts that are offering things that we don't offer. We do not offer agriculture, for example. We've got some kids that are interested in that, so maybe we could work with neighboring counties to trade these kind of experiences for kids through these digital platforms. And so we see that as being a real potential down the road as far as being able to extend opportunities for our kids. And one last thing I would add here before I turn it over to Mark is that as far as walkthroughs are concerned, virtual walkthroughs, we're trying to find a way that we could, and I don't want to use the word lord over or look over, but I guess maybe to check and provide some checks and balances for our teachers. And we've asked our principals to do virtual walkthroughs, and basically what they do is during the day they'll just pick up the phone and call teachers as if a parent would, or email a teacher, and just make sure that we're as accessible as we wanted to be. The only complaints that we've had this year, just a couple of occasions where, and it might be because a teacher is engaged with another student or whatever it may be, but we want to be sure that those teachers are always accessible. So we have initiated virtual walkthroughs with our principals and ask them to spot check, if you will, during the day and just make sure that our folks are where they need to be. We do have some teachers, as Dr. Fletcher said, that come into the buildings, answer questions and work from there, than others who may live further away do not do that, and they kind of work from home. But this has been a good thing for us. It has opened up a lot of daily classroom activities that we probably haven't had before, and we're looking to hopefully engage other school districts and be able to share content, if you will. I want to turn it over to Mark now. He is going to talk to you a little bit about digital blended learning opportunities that we have and being able to utilize these kinds of things on a daily basis all throughout our district.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things I think we learned from the initial pilot, because we did introduce Blackboard for staff to be able to do blended learning, to flip that classroom. And one of the things we discovered after that first year of doing the NTI days is that not a lot of teachers really took advantage of that. And so we ended up spending 2 days of professional development just to work with staff to get them familiar with Blackboard or a learning management system, whatever choice, but to make sure that they have that time to be able to get familiar with it and to embrace it as far as being able to put assessments in, because it is so much easier, actually, as far as use of that format instead of necessarily just printing out packets. We still do that, but we're really trying to push as much toward that learning management system as possible. So we did spend 2 full days, and we have noticed a tremendous turnaround in relation to the teachers that are actively utilizing our learning management system, not only for the MTI days, but actually as part of their daily instruction. So this is all becoming more and more blended. It's becoming more and more interactive. So that's one of the big benefits I've seen from this, and what we learned from that very first year, because you know, it just, from my standpoint, it just makes sense. It's easier to monitor all the work, and it's all collected in one location. So as far as the actual work, I mean, we are looking at performance-based as opposed to that term butts and seats necessarily. You know, what are they doing, what are they getting, what do they understand? And especially working with all of our support services, such as after school and before school and whatever other opportunities we can provide students to make sure that they do comprehend the work and that they understand it and move on. As far as content creation, I'm very excited about this in relation to us being able to create our own content and also expand the courses that we offer, because we can offer multiple things as opposed to just what we could offer through one person per block of time or one class. And so this has really opened up a whole world in relation to teaching possibilities. So just very excited about that, and I can go on, but
yeah, and one. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
But one thing that I would add as Mark was talking that came to mind, I didn't have in my notes, but I think does bear mentioning. Our teacher creativity has really been tapped into, if you will. For example, we had teachers that were having issue with when we were doing paper packets, for example, having issue with staying up to date. If you plan for snow, then it doesn't snow. Those lessons that you have planned, or those packets that you send home, or even the lesson that you have prepared on Blackboard, for example, if you're not doing it on a daily basis, is quickly antiquated if it doesn't snow. Well, what a lot of our teachers have done, and we borrowed this idea from a neighboring district, but what a lot of our teachers are doing now are seminar kind of lessons. For example, our eighth grade social studies folks, they always want to teach more about the Civil War. They don't have time to do that in their scope and sequence, so they've prepared a seminar, for example, on maybe the Battle of Gettysburg or something specific about the Civil War that is enriching to students that they might not have time to do in a regular classroom setting. That's kind of a standalone unit that is housed on Blackboard or even on a paper copy, And those seminars are timely regardless of when it snows. And that has been a great opportunity. Science has done a good job with that too, kind of leaning towards that project-based learning kind of a thing. So the seminar aspect is being utilized on primarily our middle school right now, but I see that growing in our district as well. And then the other thing that I've seen some teachers doing in our district that I thought was really unique is that the interdisciplinary approach. For example, science and math working together and saying you're going to have, we're going to have a science/math lesson that we're going to collaborate on together. We're going to design this and with an interdisciplinary approach, and the kids will do this, and that will suffice for their math/science lesson for that particular day. So we've kind of enhanced collaboration in our district accidentally, if you will. But we've kind of seen those things come about, and again, that's all because of teacher creativity. But I think that's probably all that we had. I'm looking at the next slide's questions and answers. So if we can help you with anything, we'll certainly be glad to. We appreciate the opportunity to participate, and thanks to the other districts as well. We've learned some things listening to them today.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of our speakers. At this point, I'd like to invite you to pose any questions that you may have into the question and answer panel. We have a couple that I will share with everyone, but in the meantime, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask any of our speakers that you heard from today, please go ahead and enter those in the Q&A panel. The first one we have is a question that was posed back when you were speaking, Beth, and the question was there any significant differences by grade level or grade range? So I know it's kind of, you have to think back a little ways, but in terms of the information you were sharing, did you see any differences, any significant differences by grade level or grade range?
Well, that's an excellent question. We really didn't see a huge discrepancy in student participation rates at grade levels. High school was slightly lower than elementary and middle school participation, but it wasn't really noticeable or significant at all, which kind of led us to believe that, you know, students are learning at all districts and they are involved in instruction, and we are really pleased with the high participation across the field.
Okay, thank you. The next question came to us during the time that you were speaking, Kathy, and it says, do your teachers not have to conduct professional learning or PLCs during their time at home on an NTI day?
They do. Was the question, again, that the fact that they were, or Jennifer, I'm sorry, that they were participating in PLCs or they had participated in PLCs? I'm sorry.
The question was, are they not required to do that, or are they required to do that during their NTI day?
They are not required to do that in their homes, no.
Okay. Okay, great. The next question was, I believe, actually we have an answer for Lawrence County to the significant differences in grade range, and so that information is also appearing in the Q&A. It was during the time that Kathy or David, I'm not sure which of you, was either at the end of Kathy's presentation or the beginning of David's, when you talked about the 10 days for NTI, did you use all 10 days for NTI or just a portion of those days?
Jennifer, we used all of those days, and it was very important to my community that we start on the first day. I know that several of our surrounding counties did not do that, or they may have sporadically chosen to do an NTI day. We did not do that. We started with the very first day that we missed and went continuously through the first 10 last year and the 7 that we've used this year.
Okay, great. The next question, and this is open to anyone, have the districts noticed an increase, decrease, or same level of family engagement in their children's learning during NTI days?
I'll be happy to answer that if it's okay. It's Robbie Fletcher. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, for us, again, we've seen an increase in parent participation, not only on the day of the non-traditional day, but also, too, we see a lot of our parents are coming in and asking more questions as far as what are our students' grades, what does standard-based grading look like. So we do see an increase of parent participation, especially on the day of the non-traditional instruction, but also as a side effect, some of our other events also.
Okay, great. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share?
In Corbin, we've probably seen an increase as well. At least it appears as such. But on the bad days, and we probably have about 20% of our kids that use hard copy packets. We would take those packets in case students lost them, whatever, to the central office, because we're on the main street and folks can get here pretty easily. And we have anywhere from 15 to 20 folks per day stop by and pick up packets for their kids. So again, it's kind of anecdotal, but I do believe that there's a degree of intentionality that happens when these parents know they have a specific item to do. It would lead me to believe that our homework on a regular day would be much more received if somehow the parents knew specifically about it, because this work is getting done at a much higher rate than regular homework.
Okay, great. Great. The next question is concerning the maximum number of days. And the question was, any suggestions on the maximum number of days in a row to use the NTI days?
Robbie Fletcher, Lawrence County. We've taken on the stance, it's rare that we will put a back-to-back non-traditional instruction day. A lot of times a weather event may knock us out for a week. So we try to plan for the whole week of at least one day in between. Usually the first day of what looks to be an event, we just have a non-school day. And then on the second day, we look for those opportunities for a non-traditional instruction day. And to be honest, our students have been very thankful that we don't put the days back to back, just like the gentleman from Corbin had stated, Mr. Cox, that it's a very rigorous day. Those non-traditional instruction days for our students. For example, I have 3 children in the district, and they'll average as high as 4 to 6. In one case last year, when we were just learning what we're doing, 8 hours of work. Now, our teachers have gotten better about interactive, what's the level. So, again, we try to separate those days one at a time. Of course, now over the past 5 years, Lawrence County, we've missed as high as 34 days. Or at least had to adjust our calendar for 34 days of snow. So 10 days helps us out. And we do try to put something in between, a day or so in between, to give our teachers time to grade, give our teachers time to respond back to students, and also just give our students some time to get quality work.
Okay, and that actually goes back to another question that we had, just stating that that they had been cautioned by other districts about doing back-to-back NTI days, so it was overwhelming for the students and staff. So it sounds like that's what you've done to kind of overcome that issue and give everyone time to catch up in between. And the next question is, how are lessons created for students with IEPs? And anyone can answer that. Okay,
we in Corbin, we collaborate and we create those lessons. They work in the classrooms with the regular ed teachers as much as we can, and certainly it would depend on the level of need that the student has as far as teacher attention. But we have several kids who can, with the right modifications, can complete those tasks on their own, but primarily we allow extra time when they come back, early morning ESS, after school ESS, for those kids who have IEPs and need teacher attention to get that attention when they come back to get the lessons done. And honestly, it really depends on the severity of the student and how high their need is. But we have found this for sure: those kids want to participate. They desperately want to do the same thing the other kids are doing. And so they have an assignment, but they, I guess, have the safety net that they have extra time and extra help when they get back should they need it, of course, pertaining to what their IEP says.
Okay, great. And let me ask this question kind of as a follow-up, is are all of the packets for each of your districts, are all of the packets the same across the entire district, or are they different, different packets for different schools?
For Lawrence County, one I wanted to follow up with a quick answer, and I'll answer your question also too, Ms. Peterson, is our special education students in the lower grade levels have a higher participation rate than many of our other students. So when compared in the lower levels, our special ed students have a higher rate of participation. So we're very, very happy about that. Of course, I agree with what Mr. Cox said about it depends on the severity of the disability, but again, we do make concessions and try to follow our IEPs as closely to the letter as we can. Now, as far as your question after that, could you repeat that again, Beth, just so I answer it properly? Or is it Jennifer? Did you ask the question?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead and ask that question one more time.
Okay. The question was, sorry, we have a lot of, are the packets the same across the entire district?
For Lawrence County, no, it's not. It is school specific, actually grade level specific. You know, some school teacher specific. It depends on where the pacing. You may have, for example, in one of our middle schools, it's supposed to continue the learning. For example, if we missed on Tuesday and we had a Google Classroom day, and we missed Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and it's supposed to continue learning from that Monday. So it is very specific to the classroom in Lawrence County.
Okay. Anything different in the other counties or sorry, the other districts?
Jennifer, it is different in Jessamine County in the fact that through the work of our PLCs, our Certified Council, we do have a more uniform framework for our work, and you know, we have some classroom specific, for instance, like AP, but for the majority of our, particularly our elementary and middle, their work will be very, very similar. And then going back to the question about the students with IEPs, we've been very diligent this school year to address those particular needs of NTI during an ARC meeting. So parents know up front exactly what to expect, and teachers can begin working on those when they have their annual reviews.
Okay, great. Anyone that can answer this concerning high schools, what does a 7-period high school do? Do they give 7 assignments to the students?
We do not. This is Kathy again in Jessamine County, and that was one of the concerns that parents had last year. And the fact that with a 7-period day, the children had 7 periods of work, plus teachers were also assigning homework from as they would typically in a normal school day. So again, we had to look at that again and understand that each of those PLC needed to get together and make some sort of uniformity in what would be expected, and then look at whether it was just an ongoing reading project, if it was a service learning project. So it was a lot of adaptation to the high school, particularly with those 7-period days.
Okay. Can someone speak to what percentage of the lessons are new material and what percentage would be considered review material in the packet?
All of ours in Lawrence County, going back to the question before, all 7 class periods have 7 different assignments. And so it is a continuation of what happened the day before. So if a teacher was going to review the next day, it would be a review assignment. If the teacher was going to move on to new material that day, it would be a new assignment. So again, it depends on what happened the last day of school. So some teachers on a normal setting will decide to review one day, and then other teachers will decide to move on to new content. So again, it depends solely on what happened the day before a snow event.
Okay, great. A lot of great questions here. We have just a few more minutes to get to these, but if we don't get to your question, we will send it out to the speakers and let them respond and then make the information available. But the next question is, how do you handle lost revenue from food service?
That's a great question, and transportation as well. And we're waiting on our check from David Cook, actually. We hear that's on the way.
Can I speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, we were at a KSBA session last week and went to Owsley County's session. And one of the things that they're doing, and this is just a little bit of a way to get some of that money back, is that they've gotten a waiver, and David could probably elaborate on this, but a waiver to actually provide some meals during those snow days on days that they can get people out, going to housing projects, for example, recreation centers, places that kids gather, and delivering meals, because it's twofold. You're gonna create some revenue that way, but you're also going to feed some kids who are probably going to be hungry. And so that's something we're going to look into a little bit in the future. Even there was a school system there that mentioned they even have their cafeterias open on days they can get in there, and if kids can get to the school, they'll feed them that day, and they can turn around and leave, or book in a lunch, whatever it may be. So there's some ways we have to do that. But now, as far as instructional assistants, bus drivers, kitchen staff, those kind of folks, we have a system set up where we monitor those days, and they actually make those days up. The kitchen folks will work in summer feeding to make those days up. Bus drivers will do additional routes for field trips, things of that nature. Instructional assistants will work in summer school, but we try to capture all of our manpower hours back by letting them work additional days, because quite frankly, during the NTI days, they have no responsibilities. And we've not really had very much pushback on that. It took a little while to get the matrix set up, but once we did that, it's become a pretty easy process to capture the manpower back. Now, the lost revenues is another story, but we're going to look into doing what Owsley County's been doing.
Okay, someone else wanted to provide some information?
Jennifer, this is David. A couple of things I wanted to respond to on that. One is, there is a revenue issue in both of those areas. In the food service, it's a USDA problem where they will not allow, if you don't come to school, physically come to school during the regular National School Lunch Program, you cannot get reimbursed for meals. What David was mentioning is in Owsley County, they applied and were accepted into a very small pilot last year. That in essence, basically the way it looks is they get to do summer feeding on NTI days. So they get to prepare meals at schools and take them to locations in their community and serve those to kids who come to those sites rather than transporting them on buses and so forth. That's how that pilot is working. The USDA is very interested in expanding it, but they're waiting for one more year, this current year that we're in, of data from I think it's only 4 or 5 districts nationwide, and they will then open the program hopefully next year to more districts, and we hope we can just get a blanket acceptance into that waiver for our participating NTI districts. As it relates to transportation, a little bit different story, because the biggest part of the argument that is made by transportation folks is we are not transporting kids. Why would you need to be reimbursed for that? But again, Owsley, being the district that's been involved longest, has already, and I don't even know that David and Kathy know this, Owsley has come to the transportation folks at KDE. There hasn't been a resolution to this, but they have presented an interesting idea related to transportation funding, and the fact that even though we're not transporting kids on those days, the district has increased costs that are related to the internet access and other things that teachers are doing, and utilities and things like that on those days, even though they're not in school, and is proposing to our transportation folks that they're somehow able to get at least a portion of their funding for transportation, but to be used for the infrastructure and the things that are going on. So it's not a direct reimbursement of transportation costs, but it's other costs that the district is incurring, but on those particular NTI days that they wouldn't occur on other days. So that's just something that's just begun to be a conversation, but we may have a solution there too. But both of those things have been problems from the beginning of the program. We know that, and hopefully the bigger one is the food service, and it is being hopefully addressed at the national level so that all of our districts can participate in those feeding programs on NTI days and get money back so they're not losing their shirts.
Okay, great. Thank you, David. Well, in the interest of time, I want to go ahead and wrap up today by turning it back over to Michael. We will get these questions that have not been answered out to our speakers and then forward those out to all of the attendees that had registered for the event just to make sure that we address everyone and get them the information. So, Michael, I'd like to go ahead and turn it back over to you for the wrap-up.
All right. Thank you very much. So, Jennifer, you either need to hand me the ball or please, there we go. Yeah, there are a couple more slides. No problem. So we do have, first I want to thank everyone for attending today. I think we had some great presentations and some really excellent conversation afterwards, which is kind of what we're always striving for. We do have here in these slides, which will be emailed out to everyone once it is available and made compliant with all of the federal regulations. But we have here the references that we use throughout the presentation today. We also want you to stay connected with us, our website, RELAppalachia.org, or you can tweet, follow us on Twitter. My email is there as well as the director for the lab. Also important, as you log out, you will be taken to a survey about the event today. We take your feedback very seriously and are always striving to make these presentations better, whether it's the content, the format, the technology, whatever it may be. So if you have suggestions for additional follow-up topics that we might be able to work on, we're always interested in those as well. So again, thank you to everybody. We'll probably close it out here in a few minutes. And as you leave, we will, like I said, direct you to a survey that we really do please ask you to take the time to fill out. Thank you very much.